going live. Good morning and welcome to this week's webinar, the final webinar in our series of management and the final webinar before our Easter break. This series we're going to be discussing managers, and we couldn't really leave the series without discussing a billing manager versus an operational leader and which one gets the best results. We have so many questions on this all the time from our clients on what we should do with managers. But as usual, let's talk about some management stats before we get in the mood to see why managers are so important. 65% of sales leaders reported investing in their sales enablement team to improve their revenue. So they're saying only 65% of sales leaders are actually investing in their sales teams, which is quite strange. Research from Gartner suggests that it's time to change the sales enablement metrics, and companies found that sales enablement teams, currently just tracking the average metrics of their function and the impact on their pipeline and size, where they say they should be actually looking at focusing on the seller's behavior and measuring the impact on their seller's behavior and the buyer's behavior on their team. So what your team are doing and what behaviors they're doing is really important. 72% of sales leaders are prioritizing improving their sales process, according to Gartner. So the question is, has a billing manager has a time to identify what they are? 60% of sales directors report improving their sales managers' effectiveness as their top priority in 2022-23. Other top priorities from sales directors was increasing the return on their key account business or their major account business and improving the account management of those teams. And the guys at Jump, we've done lots of stuff over the last couple of weeks with lots of clients and found there's lots of opportunity in the clients that you already have. 74% of managers oversee their own sales account in addition to managing teams. This was a quite interesting one. Sales skills are the number one area of focus, but only for 38% of all sales managers. Wow. 38% of sales managers are only are the only ones that focus on sales. Interesting. By 2025, 60% of all B2B sales organizations will move from experienced sales-based selling to database selling. According to Salesforce, 84% of B2B sales professionals say that digital transformation has accelerated in the last 4 years, and that includes video conferencing, artificial intelligence, mobile app selling, and they've become the most valuable digital tools that they have. We go back to that stat. 74% of sales managers oversee their own sales, according to Gartner. And what makes that stat outstanding is that only 60 to 70% of sales reps actually hit their quota. And when we start to think, and I sort of look back at my management career, and that's probably right, only 60, 70% of your sales team actually hit their quota. Only 38% of sales managers are concentrating on developing their team, and 74% of managers have got their own sales billings to do. So that links back to the question that we started with, billing managers versus operational managers, which one gets the best results? Today we've got the full Jump team here. Dave's here, Paul's here, Heather's recovered from COVID, which is really good, so she's here. She has said be kind and do not give her the first question. I won't give her the first question.
You know what's coming, Heather, don't you? You know what's coming.
Yeah, I wonder who's going to get the first question.
If the first question would be any question, it would be about the conversation we've had before that, but we can't put that on the webinar, but there you go. So the first question is, and it's open to everybody. It appears obvious, and it does appear obvious, but what do you class as the difference between a billing manager and an operational leader?
I mean, I guess the obvious answer is that, it's in the title. A billing manager is going to be an individual who is, to a large extent, focused on generating fees whilst keeping, if you like, a group of people motivated, moving in the right direction, looking after a number of different people, but with a very strong focus on generating fees from a desk. Whereas an operational leader is generally somebody that is no longer tasked with a desk role in terms of billing, but is has overall responsibility for the business that they are involved in, i.e. managing the people around them. And I think you could probably categorize that in a number of ways. They're very much, if you like, more strategic because it's a business role as opposed to a billing role. And a lot of the responsibilities will revolve around developing their people, coaching, mentoring their people, certainly business development and account management. They should be focused on succession planning and ensuring that their people are being developed to the extent that they could do their job in due course. A lot of it, I think, is also about internal communications, attending internal meetings, making sure there's knowledge transference across the business in a timely fashion and so forth. Mostly, I would say it's about looking outward of the business in that operational role and being aware of trends, what your clients are talking to you about, being involved and meeting clients on a daily, regular basis, and so on. So I think there's, to be blunt, a world of difference between the two roles.
Heather,
Yeah,
Paul saved you a massive amount of conversation there.
No, I think Paul's right. I think for me, it's about their perspective, isn't it? Operational leaders are looking at creating opportunities for billing managers and recruitment consultants to deliver. Right, so the billing managers and the recruitment consultants are the ones who put the final round peg in a round hole and provide the opportunity for us to bill a client. Right, operational leaders create opportunities for that to happen, whether that's because they are externally talking to clients or internally developing teams and looking at strategy. It's about they are the opportunity creators for other people to deliver on.
Yeah, I wonder if it's as simple as going back to your stats at the beginning, Howard, and if only 38% of managers are focused on sales skills, that means 62% of them aren't. And I wonder if billing managers focus on the sales skills and the operational managers focus on other stuff, because really they should all be focused on the sales skills. But good leaders would be focused on it all. Sometimes billing managers are just focused on what they've got to focus on.
I think there's two ways to look at that. Looking at those stats, is 74% of sales managers oversee their own sales and their own accounts. That only leaves them a small amount of time to actually do other things. And if only 38% of sales managers are then developing sales skills of their team, you can see why, because most sales managers are managing their own business. And that sort of leads to the next question, is that most people moving into management come from either a sales or a billing background, and therefore how can you change their incentive plan to ensure you get the best out of them and their team? Because by default most salespeople are very selfish, aren't they? So how do you move from a management into sales when you've got that sales background to ensure you get the best out of the person and the best out of the team?
I think this is a really big question, actually, and one that comes up an awful lot with our clients in terms of moving people from being a consultant into, being a billing manager, and then ultimately into this operational role. And my experience is it's a transition. It's not a big jump. It tends to happen in steps, because initially people are generally still billing. Largely, that's essentially the majority of their responsibility initially, and then it develops, and that develops, I think, through the growth of the amount of people, as it were, that you're responsible for. I think it's entirely possible to bill and manage a relatively small team, but I think once you're starting to move upwards to 6, 7 people or above, it becomes increasingly more difficult. I would add almost impossible to manage and develop people around you if you are still responsible for generating a high level of income. Doesn't mean you can't still be involved in a small amount of billing. I would always argue, frankly, that the best leaders in these circumstances have their fingerprints over virtually every client, every placement, every contractor or temp sent out. One way or another, they're involved. It's just that their names don't appear on the commission sheets as being responsible for that fee generation. So I think that as you start to move up, as it were, and you grow your team, there comes a point when your commission plan needs to reflect the fact that you should be responsible for the overall revenue rather than your own personal income, your own personal revenue. But I think that there are other areas of bonus plans that are interesting to consider around this point, because to me, it also reflects upon the values of the business, what the business are trying to achieve. If it's purely finance incentivized, purely based upon generating revenue, there may be gaps here. If for example, you're a business that I'm going to give you a sort of fairly oblique example, but if you're a business that is interested in the ecology or interested in the local community and supporting and doing things outside of the business, then maybe the bonus plan may involve areas where you would be involved in raising money for charities, or if it was about 360-degree responses from clients and candidates, again, quarterly, perhaps your bonus plan might reflect that, and so on. There's various areas, but the point here is that I think that it becomes a little bit more complex, the bonus plan, once you start moving into operations rather than pure billing or part billing.
So I'm going to challenge a couple of points there, Paul, because I think it's worth challenging. I think as soon as you get to more than 3 people in your team, then there is a choice in what happens. And you look at most recruitment agencies that we talk to, and they're growing teams, and they get to a team of 4 or 5, you start to see a churn of people in there. And what you start to see, if 1 or 2 people are failing and within that team, then the team leader or the team manager usually then focuses on their own sales and just jettisons those people. Hence why there's such a revolving door, rather than if they were, as you were stating, and I think that's the right thing, if they were being paid and incentivized on the team's performance,
yep,
would they be more inclined to then recruit better people into their business, spend more time training, developing them? But as you're rightly saying, they still should have their fingerprints over every single sale. And
sure,
that is about disseminating their performance and their sales across their team to help spread the wealth across the business. And from there, and I think recruitment agencies that sort of grow team leaders with 5, 6, 7 people and they're still billing, I think they're strangling the team leader and strangling the management, because they have to make a choice if that team isn't going to hit. And as we've seen, 60-70% of most, only 60-70% of people hit target. Wow. So that means 40% of your team are missing target. So it means you've got a big challenge. And hence why, if you look at that, according to Perkbox, 43% attrition in year 1 in recruitment, that sort of says why. Yeah, because our managers aren't actually looking after the people, they're more often looking after themselves. So I think there has to be a change, and a significant change, and it's not 6, 7, 8 people. I think it's a lot earlier than that change needs to happen.
I think as leaders, we have to ask ourselves the question, how do we want our managers and our leaders to behave? What is it that we want them to deliver? Because how we want them to behave in terms of the purpose and the values of our companies is how we should structure the incentive plan, because we've all been in this long enough to know that people behave in the way in which they're rewarded.
Yeah,
So
and that's
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right.
They're promoted and rewarded the same way with just an added on bonus. That may not be the way to get the best out of the individuals or the manager or the clients that they're serving. Because often we forget in the triangle there's clients in this as well. And we may want some element of customer satisfaction in the reward, which you perhaps wouldn't get as an individual on a desk, but you may want as part of a team, or if you're leading a team. So I think we've got to go back to, well, what are the values of the business? What is the culture of the business? And what is the purpose of the business? Right, who are the leaders in that? In what way do we want to reward them? And then and start from that point.
Anything to add there, Heather?
Well, only that, I think that's nailed it. Absolutely. We get the behaviors that we focus on and reward.
That's right.
And we have to understand, what do we want each role in the organization to deliver for us, because they will deliver the things we reward them for. And we all know that one of the biggest changes for people moving into their first managerial role is that they're making decisions in the interests of the whole team or the whole organization, not in the interest of their own desk and their own billings. And we know that sometimes those decisions come into conflict. So we have to give them a reason to make a decision in the interests of either the team or the organization. And we do that. One of the ways we do that is through our bonus structure.
Then let's look at that. I'm going to sort of jump a question here for us. Okay, so early in the series of these webinars, we talked about team leaders as them being the most influential people in the business. And what we're talking about here then is how they become a role model and become the role model from being the biggest biller to the best manager, etc. So then you're talking about behaviours there, Heather. So how do you change their behaviours to ensure that they are team focused and not purely personally focused? Because as you said there is massive conflict in that when people step into that. So how do you change their behaviours?
Do you know, one of the things I think that we sometimes miss in organizations is that you have to actually make that difference explicit. So, you know, people transition into leadership roles and they start to supervise, maybe they have a couple of resources put in with them and they're starting to be responsible for them. And one of the ways in which we get those changed behaviors is to actually talk about it really explicitly, to actually debate and discuss, well, what is a team leader's role in this organization and how is it different? And what are the expectations of you in this role and how they're different? Because quite often in recruitment, we drift into managerial and leadership responsibility rather than we're consciously doing it with a full, clear understanding of what it means, so that we're making deliberate and conscious choices about the things we do. So for me, it starts with that early conversation that's very transparent and explicit about what the role is and the impact that it has, and the training that you then give to support that. And all the other things that we've already talked about fall into it in terms of how we bonus people and how we reward them. But you've got to have that really explicit conversation at the beginning about what the expectations are.
Sorry, go on, Dave, you first.
So, Paul, it's interesting, Heather, isn't it? Because often when we are talking about careers and we're talking about the next role that an individual can get in the organisation, there's an organogram which will have the title of the role.
Yeah.
But what it won't have is the behaviours that are expected to be different of the role. So you can be you can be a at the desk consultant, then you become a team leader, then you become a manager, then you become an operational director, then you become the MD, and it's on a sheet of paper, or it's on the wall, or it's on the intranet, or whatever it may be. What it doesn't have is, and this is how we expect you to behave in these two roles. And Paul used the word, and so did you, Heather. And this is the transition that we expect you to make as you take on those roles, and this is what the company will do to help you manage that transition. And all those bits are often missing.
Yep.
It's normally you do this, you do really well, you get this, you do really well, you get this, you do really well, you get this. But we don't talk about the
definition of really well, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I agree with both of you guys. I think that a couple of things worth mentioning here, and you alluded to this point earlier, Howard, that often top billers don't exhibit the kind of personality traits that you are seeking from operational leaders. And we're not condemning them. God bless them. You know, we want them to do very well for the business. But you know, very often you find top billers are very self-centered, very focused on their own income, avaricious, can be duplicitous sometimes. These are not necessarily good words, aren't they? Not bad.
Dictionary.
It's the caffeine. It's got my brain racing. But I do think that we have a habit in the industry, as everybody that's listening knows, of promoting our biggest billers straight into leadership roles, and then we get very disappointed that they don't exhibit the personality traits that we were hoping they would exhibit as a leader. And really, there can be no shock that what we see is them repeating the same behaviors, as it were, that we used to witness and love when they were actually billing at a high level. The first thing is to establish, I think, what kind of personality type the individual has, whether they're suited to the next role. Although, as we've said in previous webinars, we need to create opportunities for people at every level. It doesn't necessarily follow that big billers need to be leaders in order to be recognized within a business. There are other methods of doing that. I think you've also got to consider, and Heather's made this point very well, as you did, Dave, that preparing people in advance. So, you know, not just waiting until the opportunity arises, but making sure the coaching and the training and the mentoring is in place in order to ensure that when the opportunity arises, they're ready and they have a very clear understanding of what that role is going to provide to them and to the business, and they're comfortable with that new role and looking forward to the opportunity and capable of succeeding, rather than putting them into a position where we're setting them up to fail. And I think last point I'd make here is about role models. It's really important, I think, that where you have great leaders in the business, that people that aspire to be leaders are given the opportunity to get exposure to those people, so they get a chance to spend time with them, talk to them, be budded up by them, so that they understand what the right behaviors are before they get the opportunity to take on the role. So, getting your best leaders to spend time coaching, mentoring others in the business is always a good thing to do, so people understand what sort of behaviors they're going to need to exhibit and are keen to do that. Sorry, I shall stop talking. The caffeine's kicking in.
I don't disagree with Dr. Thoros there at all.
Yeah.
But what I think is what we've got two different things here, haven't we? As we move people in, we've got billing managers, and as we say, we have them billing for quite some time before they become, when do you go to become a non-billing sort of operational manager? So actually that person's got two different processes, hasn't they? Because they've got their personal target to hit, and they've got a team target to hit. And more often than not, the way that the commission structure is set is that they earn more money off their personal target than they do off their team target, and therefore they jettison one for the other if things start to go a little bit wrong or a little bit right, because that selfish nature kicks in. So what we're saying, I think, is absolutely correct, but what we're also not understanding is that the way that we put those roles together, the billing manager has two, different mindsets: build to earn money, or build, and I'll earn a little bit of money, because usually the commission structures are so out of sync with each other from there. So I think what we're saying is that if you paid people on team performance earlier on in the process, would we get better performance out of that? So in that case, if we looked at billing people on team performance, what line on the P&L would you pay them on? So if let's look at entry-level team leaders right through to board directors, what line on the P&L would you think about paying people on if you were paying all your management structure on team performance?
Well, I think it's a great question. And this is, again, a question that comes up a lot of the time. Do you pay them on top line? Do you pay them purely on revenue? Do you pay them on bottom line? Do you pay them on profit? Or is it a blend of the two? I think if you're trying very hard to develop your people to the point where they're capable of running a business, which is, I would hope, the general direction that we take with people that get into senior roles, then to some extent, I think profit should be involved in the bonus plan. Now, I'd say it's an adjusted profit, meaning that there are some items on that P&L that I don't think people should necessarily have included in their bonus plan. So extraordinary costs, directors, owners, dividends, and so forth should be taken out. So it's an adjusted profit line, because those people have no control over those things. But I do think that an element, a percentage, and not suggesting it's 50-50, but perhaps 20 to 30% of their bonus plan comes directly from bottom line. That helps people to focus on managing costs and so forth. But I think it's a blend at this point rather than pure revenue.
When we did this years ago, my boss changed the word P&L to stand for purpose and leadership, and our reward was on that. Clearly the numbers mattered, but he figured that if our purpose and leadership was correct, the numbers would follow. And for 2 years, he was absolutely spot on. And bizarrely, when he left and we were still left as directors, things slipped. And it was an absolute link to the very top leadership of the organization. And he was a superb leader that we followed really well. So I would encourage that where you can, and I know this doesn't apply to every organization, but where you can, you reward an element of purpose and leadership. as well as on the numbers. Because you're right, Paul, not everybody can control all aspects of the numbers.
No.
And also, not every leader, not every owner wants every member of their staff to see a full and detailed P&L. Because that often leads to lots of questions that, not that they don't want to answer from a transparent point of view, but actually it can lead you down a rabbit warren of conversations that you don't really want when you want people focused on.
Yeah, absolutely true. I mean, we've had to question your Maserati recently, haven't we, Jim? So I think that's something that's absolutely important.
I know, but that's only because I lost the Lego box, so I couldn't figure out how.
I didn't realise Hot Wheels made Maseratis, but
Good answer.
If I'd had the picture, I would have been all right. It was 99.
stick it on your laptop. Something to aim for, Dave.
That's it. You want a picture, don't you? I've got a picture. I've got a little Jack Nicklaus for the Masters this weekend.
Excellent. I love that. The idea of purpose and leadership instead of P&L. Us fluffy HR types, we love that. Yeah, don't you know? I don't know what is.
Would you have ever described Heather as fluffy, any of you guys? No, it's not an adjective I would have
I can do it myself, Paul, but woe betide anybody else.
I definitely wouldn't use fluffy.
I didn't realise that was a side effect of COVID, but there you go. Yeah, and now we've got HR is becoming fluffy. Side effect of COVID, but there you go. I think what we're talking about though is as people sort of step into that entry level of leadership. My view is that what Dave's talking about is right. People don't want them to see the full P&L. So I would be paying them on their gross profit line of their team, and they can then either sell, pass stuff on, because it's about the whole gross profit of that team, not just their input. And as we know, if they can get a team to develop, then that gross profit grows really, really quickly because it's easy to develop more people to do. If I have to grow by 10%, that's fine. But if I can grow 5 people by 10%, that's a 50% growth. And it's a lot easier to do that. I think once you start to get into that senior management, then having individual P&Ls for their team so they can see the cost for their team and then linking it with the team, the overall business performance and a certain percentage split on that then becomes absolutely purposeful. But when you become divisional and directorship, then I think having a full lens on the full P&L is absolutely the right thing to do. Yeah. It was a transition, and I think the worst transition we do is when we start that recruitment process into management is I'm going to pay you on your billings and I'm going to pay you a small percent on the team performance, which doesn't incentivize them to actually look at the team at all. In fact, it becomes a major disincentive in my view for most people from there. So I think what we've talked about mainly is operational things, performance and money. What's the key to getting the most out of your team as a manager?
Well, that sounds like a fluffy HR subject.
Heather.
What's the key to getting them out of your team? If you're going to have one thing only, right? There's a myriad of things, but one thing is about understanding your team as individuals. For me, so it's not blanket KPIs. It's not. It's about really getting under the skin of the journey each of the individual people in your team are on and how you can facilitate their progress and their journey towards being the most successful they can be.
I totally agree with Heather on this. I think this is, we joke about fluffy, but it is about getting very close to the people that work with you, understanding each individual, what their motivations are, their drivers, where they want to be going. What's going on in their business lives, even to an extent their personal lives, being that support, that coach, that mentor, and not just once or twice a year. We're not talking about an annual appraisal. This is ongoing. You could argue pretty much because we know how intense it can be in a recruitment business every day. So it is being that person for your people. It's making sure you're there, you're covering their backs, you're coaching them, you're developing them. You're their support. You're the person that's there to teach them, to help them, to support them. And this is why I think management is such a different role from running a desk. It's monumentally different. It's an interesting point that you'd like to believe that people that do a great job as recruitment consultants who place people in jobs have high levels of empathy and high levels of emotional intelligence. But you really do need those attributes if you're going to manage people successfully. And I think that transition we've been talking about between billing and managing is a very large transition. It takes time, and it depends entirely, I think, on your attributes and your interests. So I think it is about, and Heather says it very well, being that person. And if it feels like a chore to support people, to spend time with each individual, to show genuine and authentic interest in that person, then you're in the wrong job. It should be something you really love doing, you want to do. It comes from the heart.
Yeah, and I think as well, as a leader in the business, you've got to understand what makes each of your managers tick. So whilst they've got to understand how to get the best performance out of the individuals that they're responsible for, what is it that makes the manager herself tick? How do they lead? What are the skills? How do they like to be managed? How do they like to be rewarded? All of those things. And it could be that you've got 4 completely different types of managers or leaders, and they have to be managed in completely different ways to get the best out of them. And because if you get the best out of the individual leader or manager, they will then get the best out of the individual people that they've got working for them.
And I think that then links back to what we've said right at the beginning, is it's all about the people that you recruit into your business, which then links back into, leadership and purpose, making sure everyone's aligned to the values and the purpose of the business. Where I quite often, certainly in my younger days of management, I was given people to manage that, I had no connection with whatsoever, had no empathy with, because I just thought they were despicable people and didn't really like them, and I had to manage these people, and it was quite a a hard thing for me as a junior manager, because I'm thinking, you are the archetypal wide boy recruiter, which I just despised at the completely, and yet they were the people that were forced on me by my management up above. And we wondered why things never really sprung. It wasn't when I started to recruit my own team and start to say, right, I want to recruit my own people and manage my own people, that they were all aligned to sort of my ethos, that my team started to absolutely explode and grow. But once you start to inherit other things, it's very different. So I think recruiting the right people becomes really important. And I think what Heather said on the couple of questions before was that training development. It's not just training them how to run a KPI board, how to run a sales board, how to sort of discipline people. It's actually training people to manage and understand people, and what the cause and effect of what your actions have, and what the cause and effect of their actions have, and what that ripple effect is right across the business. And I think it's important that everyone sort of understands that. And I think, again, when people go into management, they have no idea of what effect they have on other people and how other people then affect them as well. So I think there's a myriad of things when we get to that situation, is, to get the most out of your team, the manager has to be, the most supportive person within that team, but can understand how to motivate, but also understand how to stop people when they get too big for their boots type scenario. And I think that's a really important thing to move forward. So
can I just say, just to that point, we are unusual in recruitment in that we almost insist that we have to promote from within and have leaders that come from within. Yet outside of our industry, those organizations that grow the fastest are the ones that have leadership and management that come from other sectors. And we don't do that in recruitment. I mean, this is a huge sweeping generalization. I know that some people do, but some of the recruitment companies that I've seen grow the fastest are the ones that have brought in external expertise, external leadership, a different dimension. They don't necessarily know recruitment, and we are an unusual bunch, but they have been excellent leaders in another organization.
That's a good point.
And we don't do that very much in recruitment. And even some of the people I speak to, not only do they not do it, they don't have any expectation that they should. And yet outside of our industry exists some amazing leaders who have run a multitude of different businesses or different departments. And we would say, in some cases, but they don't know recruitment.
But
We're different.
There's two sides to that conversation.
And we're not. We're from a leadership and management point of view, we're not. The only way we're different in many respects is that we're a bit more closed than we should be.
There's two sides to that conversation, though, isn't there, Dave? Is that, yes, there are some brilliant managers out there, and you're right, they don't know recruitment. And yet we don't bring them in to develop them. And yet when we go into recruitment, how many recruitment company that have, the owner of the business has maybe stepped out of one agency, maybe worked at another agency, and then start their own agency. So they have a very small, circular view of what recruitment actually is, where bringing someone in from somewhere else brings different ideas, and that's what your managers doing. They bring different ideas, they bring new momentum, they bring different ways of doing things, etc. And that's what we bring when we go help and work with recruitment agencies. We bring different ideas of all the backgrounds that we've got. So there is that. But what they fear is, I'm going to bring someone in managing, and they're not going to be able to bill. So how do I get my money? But what's my return on investment? Not understanding that the return on investment is if they can grow a big team and develop a massive team, they'll be far outweighed by the return on investment. But everyone's focused on this return on investment from their recruitment billings rather than just the return on investment on their people development, which is a very different return on investment.
Yeah.
So if we're saying that operational leaders get more out of their team and build more productive sales environment, let's go back to that question, Dave. Why do recruitment companies' career ladders almost remove this process right up until you get to the very end where you are becoming a board director of a business? Why do we constantly insist that people must bill and manage at the same time?
I think it comes down to a very obvious point, to be honest, Howard. I think that we've already mentioned that most of the managers that are promoted within their recruitment business are top billers, and I think there's a reluctance and a fear of losing that billing capacity. That's the essence of the issue, in my view. Now that I think can be obviously dealt with if what we've been saying is followed. So succession planning is something that's at the focus center of everybody's thinking, that we should be bringing people forward over a period of time to make up for the diminishment of an individual billing. But I suspect that the major reason is that there's a general reluctance caused by fear of loss of revenue in taking somebody away from a desk, taking somebody away from a billing role, until it becomes a necessity to have to do that. And therefore, if you've then failed to train and coach people around that individual, there's a gap, there's a hole in the revenue. And I think that's the major cause.
And was it last week, 2 weeks ago, that we were saying that LinkedIn event and the Microsoft had said that people coming into our industry, depending on the age, will have 5 different careers and 15 different jobs. So in that context, I'd love somebody to explain to me what a career ladder is.
Yeah, but I think we don't, as an industry, always value management and leadership. What we value is billing, and so we can sometimes underestimate the value of it, which is why we do it so late, Howard. We don't, and also because we're not always very good at training people to do it well. So we've got some quite poor managers, which again just reinforces that view that management isn't really that important. So we don't give time to it, which sort of reinforces the problem, because if you haven't got time to do it properly, it's very difficult to show an impact, which is one of the reasons being a billing manager is so blooming difficult, right? Because one of the biggest challenges is, how do we manage our time well? Because we're expected to do 2 things that have different focuses. So, I think there's something to do with the way in which we value the role and we understand its contribution, and the way in which we support it with development and time.
So I think there's an interesting comment from Gordon that is made. Talking about Dave, a very interesting point. You spot on. However, I would argue that usually recruiting from within, we're doing it right, and other sectors have it wrong by hiring sales managers from random sectors. And I think there's 2 sides to that. Is if you're recruiting and promoting the right people from within, then yes, you're going to get it right. But however, if you're not and you're not training those people, then what do? You end up promoting somebody into a position that isn't right for that position, and it causes major problems. And this is where hiring people from outside your business coming in may be, a catalyst to whole different things, whether from the recruitment industry or from different industries. And it's interesting when you go and look at some of the RPO type delivery teams, quite a lot of their senior management aren't from recruitment. They're not recruiters. They are about delivering to clients. They are about proper client management and client development, and they're good at managing their teams to develop the delivery process into those clients. So I think there's a wrong and right answer to what we're saying. But I think sometimes recruiting from within absolutely should be the right thing, but we shouldn't just promote from within is the right thing, but we shouldn't just promote for the sake of promotion. And I think
100% right. And the RPO point's really valid, because managing people in an RPO context is totally different to managing recruitment teams. And so, they're different skill sets and they're different focuses and they're different problems. And it's quite a difficult transition. And many people try to make that transition, but then they still behave as if they're in a recruitment context and undermine the RPO. So, and again, that comes down to transparency. Are we very explicit when we're moving people from recruitment to service delivery that the things we're going to reward and expect are different?
I think the other side is, as your business grows, you're going to need different skill sets as well. Yeah. And skill sets are very highly unlikely not to be within your business, because you're recruiting the same type of people, the sales type of people that you want within your business. And therefore, sometimes if you want to bring someone higher in as a manager or as a leader to develop a certain thing, then you have to go outside to find that skill set. And obviously that brings new ideas, new momentum, into a business that we need. So if we looked at what we've discussed, last week we discussed, the damage of promoting a wrong person into a leadership position and what that causes, okay, why would making someone an operational leader earlier in the process potentially prevent promoting the wrong people?
I think this comes down to everything we've just been talking about, which is establishing the behaviors and values of the business, making sure that your future leaders are aligned, ensuring that people are identified as having the requisite leadership skills that you're seeking. And if the phrase is fast tracking, then fine. Fast tracking management talent into leadership roles at a pace, if that can be achieved. And if that means that a person with those skill sets, if you like, leapfrogs above others that maybe have been around longer or perhaps bill at a higher rate, then that's fine, because this is a very different role to billing and develop and making placements or getting contractors out. It's a very different role. And I think it's, to Heather's point earlier, it's making people aware of these career paths and opportunities. That leadership, as we talk about it, isn't for everybody. Not only because we shouldn't wish it for everybody, but because a lot of people working in our industry don't want it. There's an assumption that at some point everybody wants to be a manager or a leader. That's wrong. It's not true. It's not true.
It's not true.
But you have lots of people.
Something in there about risk as well. So, one of the things that we do by asking people to keep one foot in both camps is we sort of think we're de-risking the process a little bit.
Yeah.
And actually, if we're early, we take them off a desk and we make them a leader, we're taking a risk on them. And that's really, that's something that we're not always very comfortable with. And I wonder if there's something to do with that in there as well.
It's interesting though, because we're talking
a bit.
Yeah, you may be right. It's interesting because you've reminded me that even back, and as you guys are well aware, I've been in the industry about 10 million years, but back in the 70s, early 80s, back in the old Alfred Marx
Bureau.
So
we all roll our eyes and go,
here we go again.
This was pre-Thesaurus days, though, this was.
This is even,
was it? Okay.
Prehistoric.
No big words.
No, not pre-thesaurus, prehistoric, I think is perhaps more appropriate. Yeah, but I remember the old Alfred Marks Bureau days, and they weren't hesitant in this sense. You know, we were taken off of desks and asked to manage, as we called them, a branch, because they were high street offices, high street branches, right back in the 70s and 80s. And I wasn't given a personal target. My target was the office. It was the actual business. It was
I
based
remember
purely
my
on
branch
revenue.
manager well, Sandra. Sandra, the branch manager.
I remember
In
Sandra.
Alfred
Anyway,
Mark.
I remember. So, you know, this isn't a new concept, is what I'm saying. I mean, and that business at that time was the biggest and the most successful in the country. So this isn't a new concept. Getting people to come off of revenue generation and being paid purely on the business, that's not new. This has been around all these years that I've been around. So, but there is a general reluctance, and you're right, Heather, in saying that people are, you know, there's a lot of risk, and I can understand, we all understand why business owners are concerned and anxious around this point. But it is about, we always talk about it, preparing in advance, you know, not just walking into a situation. This is something should be embedded in businesses where people are developed and coached and trained. So when the opportunities arise, they're ready to be successful, not thrust into a role they're unprepared for and are guaranteed to fail in.
Yeah, I think we don't have the wrong people. We have the wrong jobs often. The people we've hired are the right people. Sometimes we put them into the wrong jobs. And also when we promote people, we have this expectation that that's their new job forever and ever. Well, actually, it may not work for a variety of reasons. And if we've got a nice culture and a welcoming culture and a strong culture, they can go back to doing what they were doing before. Doesn't often happen in recruitment. People get promoted. If it doesn't work, they leave, which is a shame. Just to say, Paul, I looked up a couple of words for our guests. So duplicitous is
Yes.
people who like Dua Lipa's music. Avaricious is people who keep birds. So I'm not sure the whole things, but I did thought I'd check. So I am intelligent.
I'm going to have to Google who Dua Lipa is.
I've no idea. Don't ask
be
me.
careful.
I think she was Vera Lynn's friend, wasn't she? I'm not sure.
She was Alfred Mark's daughter.
So what we're saying then is that, you know, if people took that risk a little bit earlier, as Heather's describing it as a risk, but it's more of a calculated risk by promoting the right people into the right jobs and by having the right promotion criteria to get them, not just
and the right development once they get there, Howard.
And then train them to deliver at that level.
Yeah,
we might see a whole different growth pattern from companies and see a whole different attrition pattern from companies, as it should start to reduce that attrition pattern because we should have better people coming in into those type of roles. So I think it's important that we start to think about these type of things rather than just doing the same old, which we know doesn't work to the vast majority, and we've got to sort of change that. So let's lock that down for this week. It's the last session of the management session, and we're going to take a break next week because obviously it's Easter this week and Easter next week, depending on school holidays, etc. So obviously we want to make sure we capture everything. The week after that, we're going to start a series of 3 webinars, which are going to be all about different types of things. The first one, Jojo Howell's going to join us. We're going to talk about outsourcing and how can you outsource part of your sales and part of your recruitment strategy. We're going to have a really in-depth view on marketing, and we'll talk about the 10 things that we should be asking our marketing manager, director, outsource marketing teams to make sure they're doing the right things. And the final one, we're still working on this. We're trying to get 2 or 3 of the major CRM providers in the UK to come on and talk about what technology is really going to enlighten the recruitment industry in 2023 and beyond. Because as we've seen already and heard that, you know, AI, automation, digital, etc., is becoming more and more the norm. So we're going to try hit that head on, and we're going to try and bring some of the big hitters into the marketplace to have that conversation. We're still working on that, so you know, if we can get them, that'll be great. So ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say thanks for joining us, team. Thanks for your input. Enjoy and happy Easter, and if you haven't sent me an egg, please do so.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Bye.
time.
Easter,
Bye now.
everybody.